I'm here today with Jorge Contreras, and Jorge has an incredible story that started with humble beginnings. He was born in Orange County, California, to Mexican immigrants who sold drugs his entire childhood. Jorge's father was an alcoholic and passed away when Jorge was just 12 years old. He also barely passed high school with 4 Fs and 1 D. Still, he found a way to break through and become a success. Jorge dropped out of college at age 20 to start his first business traveling the world as a professional Latin dancer and instructor. At 24, he became a homeowner. By the age of 27, he retired his mom. At 28, he had traveled to 25 countries as a successful dance entrepreneur with 8 million views on his videos on YouTube. And today, at 32, he's happily married with a young daughter in Los Angeles County and is financially free. Jorge is a 7-figure earner, has over $1 million net worth, has ownership stake in over 1,200 units through an apartment syndication, owns a portfolio of over a dozen Airbnbs, and teaches people how to build passive income through owning Airbnb. Jorge, it's my pleasure to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks, Luke. Definitely appreciate you having me on here. It's an honor.
Absolutely, Jorge. So, I want to get more into your amazing journey of, overcoming the odds to become a success. But let's be honest, we can't ignore it. Everything that's happening right now. It's for those, depending on when you're listening, it's March 2020, and the coronavirus is sweeping the world. Like, people are sheltering in place. The economy is going down. So, Jorge, tell me a little bit. You're in real estate. How is that affecting you and your business right now, and how are you handling it?
Yeah, definitely. As you know, the majority of the U.S. and the world is in quarantine, so people are not traveling. So tourism has definitely taken a big hit, and that directly impacts short-term rentals like Airbnbs. So the Airbnbs are definitely down from a percentage and revenue perspective, but there's been a lot of things that we've done, like we've changed the titles to utilize what's going on today. So for example, we have quite a bit of short-term rentals around the downtown LA, Southern California area. And in downtown, as you can imagine, there's people living on top of each other, really small spaces. So for those that have the means, they may want to quarantine in a bigger, nicer, spacious home. And so we've been using the words like perfect, sanitized home for quarantine, things like that. We've also, of course, lowered the prices, and it's been helping, and we've been getting more bookings that way. But overall, they're still down. But of course, this shouldn't, from what they're saying, I know I was looking at what Mayor Garcetti here was saying, and he's anticipating that another 3 to 6 weeks before things start to, come back to normal. So hopefully, we're just holding on, and, this too shall pass. Like I said earlier, we've gone through a Great Depression, 32 recessions, and this too shall pass. And, you got to roll with the punches. It's not going to be, just a honeymoon phase throughout your entrepreneurship journey. So honestly, it's in these times when you learn, because when things are going great, you're just like, awesome. You're not really looking at what could I improve, because you're just riding the wave. So right now that things are difficult and things are challenging, I'm asking myself, what could we have done to be even more prepared, and what could we do to be prepared for the next time? So a lot of the learning nuggets and the lessons are really right now during this difficult time.
Absolutely. You're right that, we've dealt with stuff like this before. We were talking about this off camera before we started here too, that we've dealt with things like this before, but like you said, this too shall pass, and, really, see who's strong enough to make it through and who's not. But, I want to get more into some tactical stuff for our listeners, who are especially knowing in today's economy, how do we handle this and deal with this, especially when it comes to like real estate and personal finance, which are things that Jorge specializes in. But I always like to start with the journey, because there are a lot of lessons that can be learned from how you grow up and how you learn. So first off, Jorge, I want you to take us through what things were like for you in your childhood growing up in Orange County, California.
Yeah, great question. So I'll tell you guys a little bit about my upbringing and some of the obstacles and challenges that I experienced that, again, during those difficult times is who I've become in the process and the journey, and what's molding me into the person, the individual that I am today. So as Luke mentioned earlier in the intro, I grew up in an environment surrounded by gangs, smuggling people illegal into this country. My dad was a drug dealer for almost 30 years. I remember one of my earliest, for me, I remember things that have like emotion involved. So when something amazing or something very difficult happens, I remember that like images and pictures. And one of the first, some of the images that I remember when I was 5 years old is being at the funeral of my half brother who was murdered in a gang. And I didn't have a close relationship with him. It wasn't something that, my dad had kids with 3 different partners. And we, I've always said a lot of people, but small family. We never learned the value of intimacy, connection, brotherhood, sisterhood, and being there for each other. So we were always just scattered and separated. But I remember being at his funeral and just like feeling and experiencing all the pain that everybody who was really close to my half brother was feeling. And then, of course, when I was 7 years old, the other strong memory that I have is that when clients would come over to our house and my dad wasn't there and they wanted to buy drugs, my siblings and I was 7 years old at the time, would actually be the ones who would sell the drugs to the clients. And that was just normal. And then the next memory is, being actually going back to 7 years. No, I'll come back to it. I was 10 years old, and my parents would send me and my other half brother to Tijuana, Mexico, to go and smuggle people across the border. And I would make $100 every time I would go. And I thought that was pretty good money. The other memory is going back is I'm 7 years old and I'm 7 years old and the doctor tells my father, if you want to see your youngest son, they used to call me Jorgito. If you want to see your youngest son, Jorgito, grow and you want to be around, you need to stop drinking like immediately. And he did stop, but the damage was just so bad. He had very little liver left, and what was left was just damaged. And so when I was 12 years old in 1999, he died of cirrhosis in the liver due to the alcohol. And at the time, my mom, she always cooked, cleaned, did, what a lot of Latino housewives would do back then, never really worked, never went to school. Both of my parents never went to school since they had to start working at a very young age. And so she didn't know how to speak English. She didn't know how to read. She didn't know how to write. Now she's 60. She'll be 62 this year. Still doesn't know how to read or write. She just knows how to write her name. And so when he passed away, she said that she couldn't take care of me. So I started living with this other lady named Estela, who was her friend from the same ranch back in Mexico. And then Estela said, hey, I'll take care of you as long as you keep going to school. She said, I'll feed you, I'll clothe you, and I'll put a roof over your head. At the same time, something that is very, again, another photographic moment that I remember is when I was in 7th grade, shortly after my dad passed away, my 7th grade teacher, Mr. Parcell, he came, to my desk. And this is my substitute teacher, not even my everyday teacher, but he knew what I was experiencing and what I was going through. And I remember that he looked me in the eye, he kind of came at my level and he said, Jorge, you don't have to repeat the patterns. You don't have to be a product of your environment. He said, you can set a new standard for your younger siblings and you could change the world.
So that's really great. And that's so awesome you had a mentor like that. I want to pause there for a second, because up to this point, you'd obviously gone through so many challenges, but to you, like you said, they were kind of just normal. I mean, like at this point, like after your father passed away, like after your mother had you live with someone else, like what was going through your mind at this point? Like, how did you feel?
Yeah, man, I was definitely in a really dark place. So when I was like 11, I picked up skateboarding when my dad was like really sick. And I remember I during summer break, I went and spent like 2-3 months with my dad. And then like 2 months later, I came back and then that's when he passed away. But during that time, I picked up skateboarding and it was like my escape. So me and my friends would skateboard. We would ditch school, skateboard, eat donuts, smoke weed, and that was normal. And that was like my way of coping, of medicating what I was experiencing, like to fill the void. So it was definitely a really challenging time. Was very disruptive. And, now in hindsight, I just wanted attention and I wanted the love that I didn't get. And so they say that one of the things that we all strive to get is to feel the feeling of importance. And when people don't do it receive that in a positive way, we will do negative things to, I think that's why a lot of gang members, do what they do, because they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel like they're a part of something. And so for me, that was my way of coping, just being disruptive, getting bad grades and all that stuff.
Mm. I mean, clearly a very tough time in your life. And as you mentioned, you went through that for a while, and then you had this mentor, this teacher who finally said something to you. So let's pick it up back there. So how did this happen, and what happened after that?
Yeah, one of the things that really started to change in my life is I started to change my environment. So I started hanging out. I made a new friend who's one of my best friends still today. What's that, 20, 18, 19 years later? His name's Ron. And at the time, Ron was, really into jiu-jitsu. He's a black belt jiu-jitsu. So he would train like 4 days a week. He was a paralegal, and he had a nice car, and he would wear a nice shirt and a suit, always had a nice haircut, and he worked out. And for me, I was just like, holy shit, like, who's this guy? Like, this is incredible. Like, I've never seen someone that has their life just so together. And it was an inspiration. And so I started hanging out a lot with him. And what I got from that conversation with Mr. Parcell was, this isn't what he said, but I heard someone else say it. But I think back to that moment is, in order to make room for the right people in your life, you got to let go of the wrong people in your life. And so I had a lot of bad influences. Sure enough, my friends who were smoking weed and ditching and eating donuts and skateboarding all day, I remember people would tell us that marijuana was the gateway drug. And of course, everyone who did smoke marijuana was like, oh, that's not true. And sure enough, they started doing other drugs. I didn't. And they started stealing cars and ended up in jail. And one of my friends is really sad. The last time I saw him was like 6 years ago, and he was flipping like an insurance sign in the street. And I was literally reaching out to his family. Finally, I knew he was there because they told me, and I went over there, and he had the mind of like a 4-year-old. And it was one of the saddest days of my life, because he was my best friend when I was like 12 years old. And it's crazy because we would hang out all the time, and his mom was, very religious and, Christian. And I would actually go to church with them because I felt like I was a part of their family. But before she allowed me to come into their family, she would always tell him, don't hang out with that kid. He's a bad influence. And it's just crazy how things turned around, and he ended up, just in a really bad situation. And my life went in a completely, different direction.
Oh, that is pretty incredible how like one or two choices can make such a huge difference in a person's life. So, you made a choice at that point, obviously had very tough beginnings, or now that you look back at it in hindsight, obviously very tough beginnings, but then you started to turn your life around a little bit. So kind of take me through the rest of high school at this point as you got into college.
Yeah. So high school. So I go into high school, and first of all, I've been to about 18 different schools. Well, from kindergarten to high school.
Oh, wow.
Very unstable household, emotionally, financially, with all these different debts and everything. So come to high school, I attended Bosa Grande High School in Garden Grove, California. And I loved, when I was like 10 years old, I wanted to be an actor. That was my thing. And I remember telling myself like, hey, well, to be an actor, you got to have multiple, great skills. So my freshman year in high school, I'm like 14, I joined the basketball team, volleyball team. I did choir, and I also did theater, like acting. So I did all 4 years, all four things. And that's what I did. And one of the things that I always did, Luke, is I did 0 periods for like extra credit. And I always went to summer school. So by the time I got to my senior year, I only needed 5 credits, which is 1 class to graduate. And I pretty much was never there. So I graduated with 4 Fs and 1 D. but I was definitely like a C minus, D plus student on average, probably my entire school year. My teachers always told me that I would never amount to anything, that I would not be successful because I was disruptive and didn't pay attention. But like Robert Kiyosaki says, A students work for C students, and that's definitely true in my life today.
So true. And for those who don't know who Robert Kiyosaki is, author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a very famous, well-known book on building wealth and success. But yeah, I mean, at that point, again, life was so different than what it is now. So, you graduated, you kind of didn't really, think you had necessarily a future or a career based on what people were telling you at that point. So after you graduated high school, what happened next?
So I graduate high school and I go to Orange Coast Community College. I take a couple finance classes, psychology classes, and I join the salsa dance team. And I've always loved salsa, especially because when I was 14, I got invited to be a part of a quinceañera, and the surprise dance was salsa. And ever since then, I started taking salsa classes. So I joined the salsa team, we're performing, and my partner introduces me. She asked me a question. She said, hey, do you know what bachata is? And bachata is a sensual partner dance from the Dominican Republic. So it's a very popular dance today. If you know who Aventura is, you know what bachata is. And a lot of people that dance and listen to salsa also dance and listen to music. So she tells me, do you know what bachata is? And this is how you do the basic. And I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. She said, you should check out this CD called Aventura. It's a live recorded, CD from their concert in Madison Square Garden in like 2006. So I buy the CD and I just fell in love with the music. The music talks a lot about, alcohol. It talks a lot about loss. It talks a lot about love. It resonated with my life. And I started practicing bachata every day at home with the very few YouTube videos that there was in like 2007. 3 months later, I remember I had a BlackBerry phone and I created a group text and I texted all my friends and I said, hey guys, I'm going to start teaching bachata at Yaneli's house, which is one of my female friends. So I grabbed my CD, the Aventura, little stereo, and there's like a brick wall. And I started teaching bachata for free. Then a few months later, I started charging like $5 and then like $7. And then I went to a studio and I started teaching once a week, twice a week, started doing monthly boot camps. And I remember I did a boot camp and I had like 80 people pay like $20. I made like $1,600, like over $1,300 in profit in one day. And I was just like, holy crap. So at the time, I went to this dance studio and I met a person named Leslie Ferreira, who became my dance partner. We danced and she was like, who are you? And I'm like, who are you? And we started traveling together. So we went to a Latin Dance Congress Festival in Arizona. And I forgot what the other one was. And in Reno, Nevada. And so I missed school twice. So now my college professor says, hey, you know that if you miss a third time, you're going to get withdrawn from the class. And at the time I was working at Bank of America as a personal banker. So I was that guy that would open up personal checking accounts, business checking accounts. That's where I learned about LLCs, corporations. At the time, we also did loans. So in 2008, I started, I would do purchases, refis, home equity lines of credit. And I had a decision to make. Am I going to stay in school and pursue, what did I want to do? Hospitality, psychology, wasn't even sure.
Sure.
And keep my job, or am I going to quit school, quit my job, and just go all in on dance? Which one of my goals since I was a teenager is I wanted to travel, all over the world. And the only place I had traveled to was Mexico. Our parents would take us. And so I'm the type of person that would jump off the mountain and build an airplane on the way down. And that's what I did. I quit college, never looked back. I quit my job and I went all in on dance.
Wow. Yeah. Let's pause here 1 second. And full disclosure, this is actually the second time we've recorded this podcast. We did one the first time and my computer crashed and ended up not saving. So I've heard part of this before, but, this is just incredible because you went from how you grew up to now all of a sudden you are pursuing entrepreneurship at a really high level. So did kind of like your upbringing and what you were doing as a child, that was basically entrepreneurship, right? You were learning, but you didn't even probably realize it at that point.
Exactly. Yeah. I could definitely say that my dad was definitely not an employee. He definitely had an entrepreneur mindset. He knew how to make a lot of money really fast, and it was gone just as fast through like gambling, drugs, and alcohol.
Sure. Sure. So you learned that kind of entrepreneurial spirit from your dad growing up, but then you actually did it, but obviously did it in a, legal way growing up as a dance entrepreneur. So you were all of a sudden, you're just like traveling the world, you're making money doing what you love.
Yeah, I started traveling to different countries, and I remember there was a lot of opportunities that they provided to the LA dance community because we had such great talent. So, for example, many of us got invited to go to Australia to the Sydney Bachata and Latin Dance Festival. But because none of us were, had a big brand yet, they said that if we would pay our flights out of our pocket, which was like 800 a piece per person, that they would pay our hotel and give us a pass. And it would be an opportunity to create exposure for our business and personal brands. And nobody wanted to go except me and my dance partner. So we go to Australia. People love our style. They love what we teach. And the organizers of the Malaysian Bachata Festival were there. So we got invited to Malaysia.
Wow.
And I remember they sent us an email and they said, "How much do you guys charge?" And we were like, "Holy shit, we're going to get paid."
Right.
And we're like, "Partner, let's charge them $500." Like I thought that was so much money to teach dance. Like it's crazy. So,
right.
The lady who hosted the event, her husband was very wealthy. I believe he had a very successful construction business. So they rented an island called Cebu.
Wow.
Cebu Island. And literally it was just for the Bachata Festival. And of course, the festival was a complete failure from a financial perspective. Like they really lost their butts out. But man, we had such a great experience. And so it just became a snowball effect. It was like, well, we were paying all of our expenses. We were getting paid zero. And literally like this started to happen. And, long story short, but I started, traveling at 20. And by the time I was 28, I had traveled to, 25 plus countries, teaching, performing. I was brought and hired to places like Bali, where other instructors would fly in to the area to come and learn, who were teaching other dances, but they wanted to, learn how to teach this sensual partner dance from a pioneer. So so not only, did I get to accomplish that, but me and my partner and many others, but mainly me and my partner Leslie pioneered this dance in Los Angeles and in the US. We started the first bachata festival in Los Angeles. I started the first bachata nightclub in the US in like 2010. We started the first bachata dance company. We created instructional DVDs as well in 2008 that we would ship, had an online clothing store for the dance, had like 75 dancers across 8 different teams and different styles.
Wow.
And had like 8 streams of income from that.
Wow. Pretty incredible to have built that up. And, again, like you're innovating there. You were creating something that didn't exist. You saw a need for it and you made it happen. So you did that for quite a while. You traveled all over the world, obviously had quite a bit of success, but then eventually you transitioned into real estate. So take me through how you transitioned into real estate and why you decided to leave the dancing industry to pursue real estate.
So it goes back to 2008 when people would walk in and purchase properties, refinance properties. I would see people come in and do a refinance and pull out, some equity and then reinvest that and get another property. I used to sit down with, men and women who owned 3 gas stations and who owned like 6 restaurants, like a chain of Mexican restaurants called Alberto's, which is really popular here in Southern California. So I got to sit down with all these entrepreneurs and investors, and I saw how much money they had in their bank account.
Yeah.
And it was just incredible. And I was operating in an area where it was primarily Hispanic. So there wasn't like a lot of wealth, but the people that came in were doing very well for themselves. And I always saw real estate as this external, out of this world, unreachable, business or career. But in 2011, I decided that I was going to buy my first property. And I didn't know that I needed to have 2 years of business tax returns. And again, I never learned that in school, right? And I went to school, elementary, high school, community college for 3 semesters, and no one told me about how taxes work and how to buy a house. And so I only had 1 year, even though I've been operating my business for many years, I had only done taxes in 2011. So they said, you need to wait another year. So in 2011, I decided I had the option of getting a 1-bedroom apartment for $1,500, or a 1-bedroom for $1,000, or a 3-bedroom for $1,500. So I figured that if I went for the 3-bedroom, we could all pay, 3 of us could pay $500 rather than me pay $1,000. And that means I would save $6,000 over the next 12 months, right? $500 a month. So a year later, and then I also bought all the furniture in that apartment that I would later need in the house. So I get the house, and I got a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2-story home for $240,000. I did a 3.5 FHA, so my down payment was $8,200. I got $6,000 from that I had saved, and then $2,200 out of my pocket. And since I got a taste of property management and interviewing people and creating a 1-page penned lease agreements, and I learned how to do a credit check and a background check, using websites. And back then they were paying $500 for a tiny apartment. I'm like, people should be able to pay $600. So I rented 3 bedrooms at $600 a pop. And that $1,800 covered not just my principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, but also all my utilities. Now, I decided to save the $1,800 that would have came out of my pocket in case I ever needed it. And 2 years later, 24 months of saving $1,800, I had $42,300 in my bank account.
Not bad at all. And look at you, like, you didn't necessarily have like someone educating you on all this. Like, you just thought to get resourceful here, and talk about like the importance, especially through your journey in life, of a lot of people. There's a quote from, I see you have the Tony Robbins hat. He says, when you don't have the resources, get resourceful. Talk about how important it is to, even if you don't have everything in front of you, to get resourceful and really make things happen.
Yeah, so it really comes down to mindset. Most people will say, oh, I don't have the resources. And Tony talks about, it doesn't matter if you don't have the resources, it's about being resourceful. It ties into what Robert Kiyosaki says. Instead of saying, I can't afford it, is how can I afford it? So if you ask yourself better questions, you're going to get better answers. And so kind of to pick up on that story, now it's 2014. I have an additional $42,300 in my bank account. And what would most, 26-year-olds do? They probably buy a car, they gamble it, they go on a bunch of vacations, and then 1 or 2 years later, that money's gone and they're more poor and broke than they ever were before. But I saw the value in building another unit so I can just continue to build leverage. So I got permits from the city, and I built a tiny 220 square foot studio, new construction. So now I get this experience of building, getting permits, going to the city, hiring, getting bids, going through the whole process of the inspections until it was finalized. And my investment was with about 25 grand and 5 grand for a couple other upgrades in the backyard for a total of 30 grand. I now had a studio with its own kitchen, with a bathroom, really nice laminate floor. And it was completely independent, attached but separate structure from the property. So now, not only am I living mortgage payment free from the main house where the 3 tenants cover everything, but now I'm making $1,000 a month in passive income. And that was a breakthrough, because growing up, people always said that money didn't grow on trees. And what I realized after that experience is all the people that told me it wasn't possible was only a reflection of what they had never accomplished in their life. And so what I got from that is, don't take advice from people that don't have the result and outcome that you want. And in 2.5 years, you take 12,000 divided to 30 grand, it's 40%. So in 2.5 years, I recouped my $30,000. So now I'm like, that was another breakthrough. I'm like, holy moly, now it's what, 20, whatever the timeline is.
Sure.
But now I got my 43,000 back plus mortgage payment free, and now I'm making 1,000. So I was like, man, I could reinvest that money. And so I did it again, and I bought more properties, more units, until I got up to 2 duplexes and 2 triplexes, and the rest is history. So I learned how to grow money on trees by learning how to plant the right seeds and how to water them and just be disciplined and focus. And so that took me to, by the time I was it was 2017, I was able to replace my 6-figure dance income with 6-figure passive income from rental properties and Airbnb in 2017.
All through learning real estate, learning how money works, and then just going out there and executing and making it happen.
Yeah, and one part that I left out is, so in 2012, I was introduced to the law of attraction, and that began my personal development journey, and I started reading other books. And in 2015, I became a student at the Rich Dad, Poor Dad education, which is called Legacy Education. And in the package that I purchased and invested, I got a mentor, Mary Jo Wilson, for 3 days, one-on-one, 8 hours on Friday, 8 hours on Saturday, 8 hours on Sunday. And the biggest thing that I learned from Mary Jo, Rich Dad, trainer and coach, was not the different strategies, but the mindset. She had a very unique way of thinking. My mindset from 2012 to 2015 is every month, in addition to the mortgage payment, I would send anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 a month towards the principal. At the rate I was going, Luke, I was going to pay off this property by the time I would have been 32. So 8 years from the time I bought it. So I had even refinanced a home to a 15-year loan. And on top of that, I was still sending those principal payments. And she asked me on day one, why are you doing that? I said, because I want to create financial freedom. She said, that's not how you do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what do you mean? I was like, I'm going to, in 8 years, from then, 7 years from now, it'll be paid off. She's like, yeah, but you'll still be stuck in the rat race. And I was like, okay, so what should I be doing? She said, if you want to create financial freedom, you need to get into a lot more of good debt, which will create cash flow producing assets and more passive income and more leverage and more wealth. She said, if you want to create long-term wealth, you should do a refinance, cash out, put a 30-year, bring your payment as low as possible, cash out as much as you can, reinvest, buy more properties, and create more passive income. And what she said is, she said it's 2015 now, and let's say that in 10 years, your property went up, say 500,000 in equity, random numbers. Well, what would happen if you had 2 properties? And that'd be $1 million. If you had 4 properties, that'd be $2 million. If you had 8 properties, that'd be, just the compound effect of building equity and wealth in one. You could have multiple properties building wealth. So that mindset of learning that not all debt is bad, like we learn in our society, is that there's 2 types of debt: good debt and bad debt. Good debt puts money into your pocket. Bad debt takes money out of your pocket. Not only that, but when you do a refinance cash out, the money you pull out is tax-free because you cannot pay taxes on borrowed money.
That was, I'm sure, well worth the investment you made to her. And actually, speaking of which, tell everyone how much you invested to work with her.
It was a package of 35,000. And yeah, I went to Les Brown was having a convention, a 1-day convention in Los Angeles, and it was free. And they had thousands of attendees. And I remember I took my friend Victor, and there was like a stocks guy, an eBay guy, a real estate guy, real estate gal. And they were, just offering multiple different strategies. But the idea was like, get started. It's like Les Brown says, you don't have to be great to get started, but you do have to get started to be great. And I went there. The reason it came up on my newsfeed on Facebook is because I was keying in words. I had just read Rich Dad Poor Dad 2015. That's 5 years ago. And
then because I keep the words real estate, this convention came up. And so I bought a $300 3-day course to go to the Rich Dad course. And so I took my wife, and long story short, on day one, I knew that this was for me. It was exactly what I was looking for. And that kind of ties into the story of how I got my mom's house. Do you want me to go there?
Absolutely.
So I'm sitting there day one. And at the time, my wife was working in law enforcement. I'm definitely the person that goes for it. My wife is definitely more analytical, needs, process, procedure, structure, organized, make sure we think about it, things like that. So we walk in there, and being the, the analyzer and person that just wants to control, the environment. She sits there kind of like this, like, what are they going to try to sell us? All this type of stuff. And after day one, like, as the day went on, like, her arms started to kind of fall down and started to kind of lean forward, and this was all making sense. And she was like, babe, she's like, you were born for this. So on day one, they talked about how, it was going to be 35 grand if you actually wanted to join. But for me, one of my spiritual coach told me that when I was 4 years old, I made a decision at that young age that I would take care of my mother, because I saw her suffer so much. My dad was physically abusive, and he would come home drunk and like just hit her, and she always had black eyes, and it was just terrible. And so I have like a sweet spot for like women, because I've just seen my mom in particular just struggle so much that I always want to help and take care of women. So one of the decisions that I made in 2014, on May 20, 2014, I made my first vision board. And one of the things I had on there is that by 2019, I was going to buy my mom a home. We got very comfortable, my siblings and I. For my mom and my dad, I have one brother and 2 sisters, and then a sister from my mom's side and 5 brothers from my dad's side. And we were very used to the fact that she would stay 2 days with me, 2 days with my brother, then my sister, then my cousin, then an aunt and a friend. She never had like her own place to live, because she didn't know how to provide financially for herself. So in 2014, I made that decision. I put it on my vision board. I said by May 20, 2019, I will buy my mom her first house. There's a big difference between being a homeowner and being an investor. It's just 2 completely different monsters. It's not the same language. It's very different. So I knew how to buy my house, but I didn't know how to acquire other properties. So I go to, when I'm there at that training, I remember, Luke, I called my mom after the first day, and I got so emotional that I couldn't even speak, right? And I might get emotional right now too.
No,
so I called her, and I said, Mom, I figured out how I'm going to buy you your house. But before I said that, I just called her, and I'm crying and I'm sobbing, and she's like, in Spanish, she's like, what's wrong, mijo? Is everything okay? And like, I just couldn't talk because I was so emotional. And my mom thinks of the worst, right? It's just always fear. She got it from my grandma. When I visited my grandma 3 years ago, I was like, man, she's scared of everything. That's where my mom gets all this fear, all the scarcity. And that's where I got that from too. So long story short, I'm finally able to speak. And I told my mom, I'm taking a real estate class, and I learned how I'm going to buy you your house.
Wow.
And 2 years later, no, like a year and a half later, on January 22nd, 2017, I blindfold my mom. I tell her I'm going to take her to a restaurant. And I always did things like that where I would surprise her. So she thought we were going to go eat. My sister's in on it. And I purchased a property. I got her a property that was initially listed. I remember I saw it on Zillow. It was listed for $299. And it was just a beautiful, perfect house, 5 to about 1,500 square feet, remodeled in the area of Riverside, California, which is where she wanted to live, since all my family had moved over there from other areas that are more expensive in California. And I remember I knocked on the homeowner's door on that Tuesday, and I said, hey, I'd like to speak to the agent. And because I had a pretty good understanding of real estate, I'm like, I could just have him double dip, so that way he wants me to buy it. And
Right.
so I look at the property, the owners let me see it, and I'm like, this is my mom's house. I called the agent, and I said, what's it going to take to not have the open house this weekend, so that I can go and, buy this property. You represent both of us and you double it. And of course he's super excited. And he's like, well, let me talk to them. And he said, what it would take for us, to take the property off the market and not have an open house and go into escrow with you is that if you go from the $299 listing price to 310 or 311, I said, let's make it 315. So they took it off the market and I purchased the property. And, 45 days later, my mom's blindfolded. I take her out of the car. I have the whole video on Instagram, and it's a rainy day. And the house, I furnished the house like everything. She didn't even have to go buy spoons or toilet paper. It looked like somebody was already living there, just everything. And I walk her to the front and I open her palm and I put the keys and I said, welcome to the rest of your life.
Oh my gosh. Incredible. That is just an incredible story. I mean, I can't even imagine the emotion that she felt, you felt, your whole family felt. I mean, just take me through like what it meant at that point to be able to do that for your mom.
It just again, it was like another breakthrough. It just, it's like they say, you can only take yourself as far as you can take yourself. So it took my value and belief and mentorship to just a whole other level. It made everything, the $35 that I invested into real estate and mentorship, worth it. And it just felt amazing. Like it just, honestly, it's for me, probably the biggest, one of the biggest accomplishments, of my life. And it just felt amazing to, see my mom go through she's the real MVP. She stuck with my dad, even though he cheated on her and he was in and out of jail. And she just went through so much. And to be able to do that for my mom was just powerful. And it was life-changing, and it was a breakthrough in itself.
Wow, that's just so amazing and incredible. To your mom, clearly a very strong person, but to be able to do that to her, like you said, I'm sure was just amazing and incredible. So clearly you had a very strong reason why you were doing that. And now you obviously coach people on real estate. You've built up a lot of, wealth yourself, and you are in the mode of giving back, which seems like something that is really important to you. So, now that you've obviously built up your success, you are coaching people, and I want to get a little bit tactical right now, especially in this economy, because this is a very uncertain economy right now. Someone is thinking about starting to invest in real estate. Maybe they have little or no money to invest. What would you tell that person?
I would say that there's two types of people right now. The person who is looking to buy a home and interest rates are historically low. So if you're in an area where you can afford a property, with your debt to income ratios and all that, I would say that a person could get into like a 2 to 4 unit property with the FHA loan. So they put a low down payment, 3.5%. They could live in one unit, Airbnb or long-term, the other, 2 or 3 units, or 1 unit, and create leverage. And for the person who may be paying, $1,500 or $1,000 or $2,000 or $2,500 or $3,000 in rent, that would really make sense, because they might end up in a situation owning a couple units where because of the leverage of the other rentals, they would actually pay less owning than they would renting a house and contributing to somebody else's last name and wealth rather than themselves. That would make a lot of sense. For other people who are in a position where they can only get into a single family home and maybe there's a shortage of units, or maybe in their area for some reason the loans don't allow for low down payments into multiple units, then it may not be worth it. I would say definitely make sure that if you're looking to buy right now, get a 2 to 4 unit property, low down payment, low interest rate that you could secure on a 30-year loan, and just create leverage. And I would say that that's the only reason it would make sense. Otherwise, you may want to just wait for prices to drop.
Okay. So take me through how you're approaching your business right now, because maybe or your real estate investing right now, because I think will give people a further look into how you approach it and how you think about it yourself.
How I think about myself in regards
right now, what are you doing for your real estate investing right now? How are you approaching it yourself right now?
Yeah, great question. So what am I doing right now? So that property that I purchased in 2012 as a single family home and then built a unit in the back. A year later after that, I split the main unit into two units, and then I sold the property a month. We closed escrow a month before this whole Corona situation happened. So I was able to really sell at the top of the market, great price, uh, for much more than what I paid for it. And with two operating short-term rentals, which we are now managing and co-hosting for them. So we're still making cash flow from those properties. And what I'm doing right now is I'm not buying real estate right now, personally, because I still have a duplex and a triplex right now. I live in the duplex, and the short-term rental, which is next door, pays for the entire mortgage. So I'm already living mortgage payment free, right? So I'm going to wait out for prices to drop. And I believe with the biggest thing that's happening right now is that's even bigger than the virus is the financial, devastation that our economy is taking. And I do believe that real estate will bottom in the next 1 to 3 years, because even in 2008, it took about 2 years for prices to bottom. It's not like stocks where they just fluctuate. So I'm playing the waiting game, as far as for purchasing. And what I am doing actively is acquiring more short-term rentals and Airbnbs on the co-hosting side, where we manage other people's Airbnbs, which is great because we put zero money out of pocket and we collect, 20 to 30% of the gross revenue. So it's guaranteed revenue, and our expenses are close to zero.
Okay. Actually, right there, because I know that's a big thing that you teach. Explain how that works to people, or someone who could come in and do that. Like, how would they go about getting started with that specifically?
Yeah, so when it comes to Airbnb, there's three options. You could either buy property, or you could sublease, which is where you pay the fair market rent, and then you do the Airbnb arbitrage model. So say you pay $1,500, but the Airbnb brings in $3,000, then the spread is your profit. The other side, the third option, is where you co-host. It's where, imagine, Luke, that you have an Airbnb, or you have a property that is maybe doing $1,500 as a long-term rental, and I see your property listed on Zillow for $1,500, and you're looking for a 12-month lease. I reach out to you and I share with you how there's properties in the area doing like $3,000 to $4,000 a month. Would you be interested in creating more income while being hands off, since my company would provide the management and we would coordinate all of the cleaning, maintenance, communication, provide a hands-off experience, and maybe you can make an extra 10 to 30% more without doing anything. And you agree because you see my credibility. So then we basically list it, implement our system. And that's exactly what other people could do as well, right? Reach out to people that aren't on Airbnb yet, show them what the revenue is in the area for similar properties and what the potential is. And then you can start creating just really infinite return on investment, because you would start making cash flow day one and have zero skin in the game.
That's a gold nugget right there for anyone listening or paying attention to what Jorge just said. Is there's a way where you can get into real estate without having a lot of money, or without having much money at all, is through Airbnb.
Yeah, I really believe that Airbnb is the most effective way to get into real estate. And if you were to remove the vehicle of Airbnb, who are you becoming in the process of operating this Airbnb? Well, one, you're learning how to manage tenants, right? Coming in, coming out. You're managing communications. You learn how to hire and compensate people correctly using like a 1099, W-9, subcontractor, all that. You're going to be dealing with repairs. So you're learning property management, you're learning hiring, you're learning just how to run a business. And what I tell my students is that what's even bigger than Airbnb, when you're, like one of my students and you're doing this, is that you're learning how to build sustainable, scalable, sellable businesses. So the knowledge and experience that you acquire in this process, you can implement to any business in any industry in the future. So essentially what you're getting is like a PhD in business, a master's in business and entrepreneurship, but rather than in school where they teach you how to work in someone else's business, I actually teach people how to start and grow and scale their own businesses, something that they could actually pass on to their family one day as part of their legacy. You can't pass on a job because it was never yours.
Really valuable and important right there. And we'll definitely get into, because Jorge does, like you said, offer mentorship and programs to help with that. We'll definitely get more into that here shortly. But, he did bring up a very good point there, that it's just a really good way to learn business skills, regardless of whether you are in real estate or not. It's transferable to pretty much any industry.
Yeah, a lot of people focus on, well, how much money am I going to make? And I got this from Jim Rohn, and he says, like, don't focus on how much money you're going to make, focus on who you become in the process. And that's always been, one of my big focuses is, don't worry about the money's going to come, but more important than the money is, who are you becoming and what are you learning in the process? And I'll give you an example. In 2017, my partner and I decided to renovate a house. We bought it cash using hard money, private money, some of our money, did like a $200,000 renovation. And we bought this property sight unseen from a wholesaler. And long story short, before we decided to buy the property, I remember I told my partner, I don't care if we don't make money. I care more of who we become in the process. And I'll tell you this, we didn't make money. We broke even when we sold the property, but what we learned in those 18 months will make us millions of dollars over our lifetime. The education, the experience, the wisdom that we got through those 18 months. And people miss out on that.
Amen. The learning that can happen through this, that can, again, apply to help you build wealth in the long run. Love it. All right, I want to ask a quick personal finance question. Then we have our final round here. So you also specialize in personal finance as well, which is a part of growing real estate. You have to be good with your finances. So a lot of people right now are probably really nervous about their finances. Whether they're a W-2 employee or an entrepreneur, no doubt, like everyone is really concerned about finances right now. What are like a couple tips you have for people on like things they can do financially right now to put themselves in a good position in the short term and the long run?
So I got this from Robert Kiyosaki. I'm a big fan of Robert Kiyosaki, and he says what you need in a time like this is like 5 things. Obviously, you need food and water. You need silver to just hedge against the hyperinflation, which hopefully doesn't happen, but there's a possibility. It's what Venezuela is going through right now. And you need guns and bullets, right? One of the things that could happen is, with like looters and like riots, right? I would say that a good sign right now is that the grocery stores are still open. But knock on wood, if those grocery stores close, or for some reason things close down and there's no more food, then that's something to definitely worry about. And hopefully that doesn't happen. But if it does, people will start to break into people's houses out of just survival, right, for food. And that's why Robert Kiyosaki says, make sure you have guns and bullets, because how are you going to protect your family? And then he says, obviously, food and water for obvious reasons, and like silver and gold, because like one of the things that the government is doing right now is I believe they're printing $1 trillion a day, like using quantitative easing. And there's nothing, the only thing that gives our dollar, any value is like our confidence, or I guess you could say oil or military, but we're not backed by gold, because in 1971, Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. So now they can print as much money as they can. And the more money they print, the more the dollar loses its value. And if they do it too much, then it's going to break the currency, where eventually to buy a water bottle, it could be like thousands of dollars. And you look at what happened in 1921 in Weimar, Germany, millionaires became homeless overnight because cash became trash. And people would burn money to stay warm because it was cheaper to burn money than it was to buy wood. It happened in Weimar, Germany in 1921. It's happened in Greece. It's in Venezuela right now. Why is no one talking about that? And it's just crazy. And hopefully we don't go through a hyperinflation, but that would be like really bad, like crazy riots. And you've already seen, everyone has seen the videos of like on social media with the tanks, and the military is already in position in case things go down. So those are the 5 things that Robert Kiyosaki recommends to protect yourself in times of crisis like right now.
Super valuable and really good insight, especially from your perspective. I think a lot of people will find value in that for sure. So now let's head into our final round. So a few more kind of rapid fire questions here. So to build success, you have to have good routines and habits. So take me through, like, what's your morning routine and what are some of your daily and weekly rituals you practice for success?
Yeah, great question. My first thing that I'll share is that the morning is for me. So I don't take any phone calls or meetings usually before noon. So from like 9 to 12 or 8 to 12, it's working out, going, having a session like in the sauna, having my coffee, my green juice, meditating. And I'll usually listen to like an audiobook or a YouTube video that's either like educational in regards to like real estate or, things like that, or just inspiration from people that have already been there and done that. And so that's definitely my morning routine. Other habits that I have is that every year, me and my wife create a vision board, and we focus on like, health, marriage, family, finance, investments, business, things like that. And so, for example, in October, we went to Cabo on vacation. And while we were there, we created our vision boards for 2020. So every year we do that, and we're always updating our vision. And it's like in the law of attraction, the secret says everything happens twice, first in the mind and then in reality. And there's a lot of power when you work physically with your hand, write down your goals, and you look at those goals. And so we have like a big board, vision board, and we keep it in our kitchen because we have like an open kitchen living room area where we spend most of the time. And this way it's a constant reminder of your goals, your vision, your dreams, your aspiration. And it's like the first thing you see in the morning and the last thing that we see before we go to bed. Those are some. Also is I'll share like this. Tai Lopez talks about the law of 33%. He says, spend 33% of time with people below you, people that you have more experience, more results, you can mentor and coach them. The other 33% is like your family and friends. And then the top 33% is people that have the result and outcome that you desire, people that can help you go further, faster, stronger, better. And so I definitely, I probably spend more of my time in the bottom and in the top and not as much in the middle, because I'm always either like more in contribution, coaching, mentoring others, or being coached and being mentored by others myself to continue to, go to the next level. So I would say, again, like my mentor said, let go of the wrong people in your life to make room for the right people in your life. So I definitely, one of my habits is surrounding myself with people that inspire me, people that push me, to go to the next level.
Love it. Great habits and rituals and routines there. And I know you're a big fan of self-education. So you mentioned it a little bit. You do like YouTube videos, podcasts, or audiobooks. So do you have any recommendations for the audience or people listening on things to get started with, or specific things you listen to you think they would find value in?
Yeah, definitely check out Luke's podcast. Right?
Appreciate it.
Interviewing amazing people on there. And 2 books that I can recommend, actually 3 books I'll recommend is number 1, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And you can get the free audio version on YouTube. Number 2, I recommend The One Thing, right? It says, what's the one thing that if you did that successfully, everything else would become unnecessary? And then finally, E-Myth Revised. by Michael E. Gerber, who talks about visionary, entrepreneur, and the technician. And it's really powerful to be able to grow and scale any business. So those are my top 3 books.
Love it. And I'll post those in the show notes too. All right. So we have 3 or 4 quick ones left. So if you could meet one person in world history, like sit down and have a talk with them on a park bench, who would it be?
Nikola Tesla.
Okay. Why is that?
Man, just all his inventions. This guy was just a genius. One of the most innovative. He had like hundreds of patents. He created the Wardenclyffe Tower, which was this big tower that would be able to provide free, sustainable, wireless and cordless energy to the entire world. But of course, they shut it down because it could have also been used as like a weapon of mass destruction. He was able to tap into the energy that just exists like around us. There's all this energy, and he learned how to tap into it to create electricity in a way where it wouldn't be bad for our environment, in a way where it could be free. Like electricity should be free because it's literally everywhere. But, he went to war with, Thomas Edison. And of course, with all the money and power that he has, they basically shut him down, and people don't even learn about him in school. And he's just a genius person. Like I said, one of the most influential people of our entire human history. And it would be amazing to be able to just learn and sit with him, have lunch.
Absolutely. I can tell you've thought about that one before, but that's great. A guy that a lot of people don't necessarily think a lot about. 3 more questions here. So first one, what hobbies do you have outside of business?
I love playing basketball and volleyball. Those are like my 2 favorite sports. So yeah.
There you go. Basketball and volleyball, staying active, working out. So next question is, where can people find out more about you or follow you?
Yeah, best thing is just go to my Instagram, THE. It's the Jorge Contreras. And I'm launching my personal brand website in a week or 2 as well. And that's also going to be, it's also going to be thejorgecontreras.com.
Okay. Awesome. I know you have a couple options for people to work with you as well, right?
Yeah, I definitely have the Real System. It's a coaching program, 90 days, where I teach people how to acquire, launch, and automate their first and next Airbnb. So again, you can always DM me if you're interested, and I can give you more information on that.
Love it, man. And last one I always like to finish on for my guests. So let's say it's the end of your life, you've done everything that you wanted to accomplish, you have your family and friends next to you. When it's all said and done, how do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered like a Martin Luther King, that even decades and decades later, your philosophies, your values, my philosophies, my values, my beliefs, the mindset, everything lives on, so that I can continue to live through others and continue to impact and transform, and elevate consciousness and just keep pushing humanity forward.
Love it. You think really big, and that's why you've been successful and why you'll continue to be successful in the future. Appreciate it, Jorge. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, man. Appreciate your time, Luke.